Morning, everyone. Great to be here with all of you on this beautiful day in North Dakota, and I want to thank so many people that are here, all of our men and women in uniform. I want to thank all the legislators that are here, and also we've got elected officials here that I get the opportunity that I'm grateful to work with every day, but Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller, Secretary of State Michael Howe, and right after myself, you're going to be hearing from our Attorney General Drew Wrigley, who was instrumental in working through this legislation. You're also going to hear from some of our top legislators and more, including Mandan Police Chief Jason Ziegler. But let me just get started here this morning and just say that this is, as always, in North Dakota, a day of gratitude, but this one especially, we're reminded today how important it is for us to be in our state when we say, as we say, backing the blue, as I like to say, with our fantastic North Dakota finest Highway Patrol. We're also backing the brown, but we appreciate them for what they do every single day, and we also know that at this time in our country where there is so many challenges relative to law enforcement and the public, and what we've seen in some of our great cities across our nation go into basically a death spiral of decline with lack of law and order. It's fantastic to live in a state where we know that our citizens and our legislators respect those people that are enforcing and working every day to keep our citizens safe and to ensure that the rule of law is part of how we maintain all of our essential freedoms in our country. So it is truly a day of gratitude. We have been a lot of great legislation working its way through the chambers and down to our desk for signing, but we've got to highlight a few of those bills today. And as I said, you're going to hear this morning from Attorney General Drew Wrigley. He is our state's top law enforcement officer, and he is, of course, a huge champion for our men and women in uniform. It's been fantastic working with Drew. We've got Representative Shannon Wars-Jones. She's the prime sponsor of House Bill 3107, and there's also a number of the co-sponsors that are here. Representatives Michael Four, Corey Mock, Emily O'Brien, Brandy Pyle, and on the Senate side, Dale Patton, Jim Roars, and Kristen Roars. Senator Diane Larson, who is here in the front row, has always been a huge supporter of all of our men and women in uniform. She's a prime sponsor of Senate Bill 2147. Her co-sponsors included Senators Beckedahl Paulson and Representatives Doctor and Vetter. Also here in the front row, one of the great friends of law enforcement in our state, Representative Todd Porter, prime sponsor of HB 1183. His co-sponsors included Representative Dr. Heinert, Carls, Casper, Lauser, Matzenbacher, Osley, Ruby, Schauer, and Senators Michelle Axman and also Diane Larson on that bill. Mandan Police Chief, who I mentioned earlier, Jason Ziegler, thank you not only for your leadership, but you get the special opportunity sometimes along with Bismarck and Burley County of spending a lot of time at the Capitol trying to influence all these bills in the right way, but you're doing that also as the President of North Dakota Chiefs of Police Association, so thank you, Chief, for your work there. We also have two officials who did a great job providing a testimony for HB 1307, and that's Stephanie Dassinger Engenbritzer, Chief of Police Association North Dakota, and Danelle Presky, of course, you all know, Executive Director of North Dakota Sheriffs and Deputies Association. And our very own Colonel Brandon Soberg, a fantastic Superintendent of North Dakota Highway Patrol. One of the bills we're signing today, House Bill 1307, emerged from discussions that Drew Wrigley and I started last year, and others as a part of our comprehensive workforce strategy. In this time of extremely intense competition for workers in all fields, doesn't matter whether it's education, healthcare, manufacturing, services, law enforcement is facing the same or tougher challenges as most professions when it comes to recruiting and retention. We know in North Dakota there are over 35,000 job openings right now, and we are tied in the nation for the lowest unemployment rate at 2.1%. That's half of what some other states are that are over 4%. But it is just so many opportunities for people that have the talent and the capability, the desire to serve, that you need to serve in law enforcement. They've got lots of opportunities to serve in other fields. with those same capabilities. And so whether it's short-staffed or fully staffed, we know that keeping our community safe is always a top priority, and we're working at every level to support and keep those communities safe. But to do that, we have to have everybody fully staffed. I have an opportunity in this role to talk to governors in other states, and we talk about our staffing shortages here, but we're still a state where people respect law enforcement. In places where this has gone on the decline, it's unbelievable. I talked to other governors, and they've got more positions open in some of these states than we have in all of our sheriff's department, all of our police departments, and all of our highway patrol. They got more positions open. They could hire take every law enforcement in North Dakota, move to one of these large states, and it still wouldn't fill all the positions. So we are also competing for talent nationally, and that's why, again, some of the changes we're making today, because we can get people that maybe want to work in a state or in a community where we respect law enforcement. We'll get some people moving towards North Dakota. In our executive budget, we proposed, we did back the blue. One of the ideas that we had was providing matching grants for law enforcement agencies so they could use to drive workforce recruitment, retention strategies for those that serve in law enforcement. With HB 1307, the state will provide $3.5 million to local law enforcement for recruiting and retention. And these funds will be available for hiring and retention bonuses for police officers, sheriff deputies, and also, importantly, corrections officers. And the funds can also be used for training and fees for law enforcement trainees in professional development. Funding will be distributed to city and county agencies based on the number of the licensed peace officers and correction officers in those organizations. And I know we always in North Dakota care and pay attention to our small communities. So $750,000 of the $3.5 million is dedicated to law enforcement agencies that have 10 or fewer employees, and the amount provided for hiring and retention to each officer is at the direction of the chief and the sheriff. So again, a great job on this legislation that we're supporting local control, local decision making, and local flexibility with the most impact and the least amount of red tape. And they'll be provided a dollar amount based on the number of licensed officers employed in that agency or that correctional facility. Just for some numbers, for everyone here, we have 1,763 licensed officers between our police departments, our sheriff's offices, plus we have about 560 correctional officers in local correctional facilities, for a total of about 2,300 people that work statewide as law enforcement officers across police, sheriffs, and corrections. And for those that are trying to say, hey, what would that look like if we put them all in one spot? Well, we talk about community, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the law enforcement, but those 2,300 people, that would be the size of like a Castleton, a Carrington, or a Bottineau, all with just with law enforcement. That'd be kind of a fun city to go visit. I'd feel very safe there. When you look at the agencies with 10 or fewer employees across the state, we have 32 sheriff's offices that have less 10 or less. We have 36 police departments that have 10 or less, and we have 3 correctional facilities with 10 or less. So the total number of law enforcement officers out of the 2,300 that work in little communities with less than 10 or less is 346 individuals. And we know that when you're in one of those small agencies, sometimes the work is even harder, not easier, because less people to relieve you on shifts, everybody on call all the time. So we appreciate especially those people that are working in the small rural areas and these small departments. Our local law enforcement agencies work hard to keep our streets and neighborhood safe, and they do that with our full support. 1307 demonstrates that Back the Blue isn't just a slogan in North Dakota, it's actually the respect that we have and a way of life for North Dakotans. Last Saturday, I think everybody probably knows this, but we had a tragic reminder of the inherent dangers of what it means to serve in law enforcement. Unfortunately, in my time, which has not been that long in office, I've had the unfortunate to have to attend funerals for law enforcement officers that killed in the line of duty. And this recently, just not that far over the border in Minnesota this weekend, 3 officers were shot when responding to a domestic assault report in Polk County, Minnesota. And one of those individuals that was shot, Minnesota Sheriff's Deputy Joshua Owen, who's only 44 years old, initially hospitalized with critical injuries, but later died. And he leaves behind a wife, a son, and a grieving law enforcement family and community. And this is, again, just not far from our own eastern border. This is one of these things where I've talked to the spouses of people who've lost their loved one in law enforcement. Is when they you leave the door and you say goodbye to go out on a shift. You literally don't know. You hope that statistically as it is that most people do come home for their entire careers, but you just don't know. And we should just never take for granted the risk that officers take when they put on the uniform, and whether that's a highway patrolman doing an ordinary stop on our interstates, or someone responding to domestic violence, or whatever it is that they're doing as part of that job. We should just never take that for granted. I would encourage everybody, if you ever have a chance to see anybody in uniform, to say, hey, thanks for your service. And just do that every time you see them. And we should show our gratitude as well as with words and with action, and that's why we've worked with Attorney General Wrigley, our legislative sponsors, which I've introduced, and others on this Back the Blue legislation, to not only let North Dakotans, but we need to let the entire nation know. We need to let the word out that in this state we respect law and order, and we respect those people that make sure that we continue to have safe communities. This is going to help us make sure that we have every one of these positions filled, because when they are filled, then it's safer for everybody that is serving in law enforcement. We have another bill we're signing today. HB 1183 moves peace officers employed by the state to the BCI Public Retirement Safety Plan, ensuring that the state's game wardens, park rangers, parole and probation officers are on an equal playing field when it comes to retirement benefits. We saw this during COVID, when there were some extra dollars that were brought in by the federal government, sometimes to local political subdivisions. We got ourselves in a bidding war, competing for the same pool of law enforcement agents in our state, and we need to make sure that we're supporting all of them so that we've got a level playing field across all of our state agencies, where we've got licensed peace officers, again, including in Parks and Rec and in Game and Fish. Because our state agencies, do often compete for the same candidates as other law enforcement agency, retirement benefits, are no longer going to be a factor in the equation, because now we've got everybody on the same plans. So by signing this bill, we'll recognize that the 162 sworn law enforcement officers working at DOCR's Parole and Probation Division, which is 98, Game and Fish, wardens 26, Park and Recreation 38, who provide law enforcement for over the 1 million visitors that we have visiting our parks every year. They're working also every day to serve and protect North Dakotans. And I want to thank the bill's sponsor, Representative Todd Thorder, for recognizing this inequity and supporting state law enforcement across all our agencies that serve our great state. So in addition to House Bills 1307 and 1183 that are being signed today, last Thursday I did sign Senate Bill 2147, which creates an income tax deduction for retired law enforcement benefits. We've been working on and continue to work on a lot of things to help drive our state towards zero income tax in North Dakota, to compete with the 8 states that have no income tax, including the 3 important ones that we compete with for people in the oil industry: Wyoming, Alaska, and Texas, that all have zero income tax. I want to thank the legislature for passing the bills that are going to exempt both active military. We did a session ago on retired military for income tax, but all of these things are essential to help us to get in migration for both military and law enforcement in our state. And so again, the creates income tax deduction for retired law enforcement benefits is going to be a great one for all those that previously served. On Wednesday, we signed HB 1309, which enhances the retirement benefits for the BCI agents. And anyway, we want to continue to move a lot of great legislation. We're going to have speakers, the batting order here for the team that's coming up. Attorney General Wrigley is on his way up. He's on deck. And then we've got Shannon Norris-Jones is going to be speaking on 1307, Senator Larson on 2147, Representative Porter 1183, and then wrapping up with the chief. Bat and cleanup, Jason Ziegler is going to be speaking. Then we'll do the bill signing after that. But right now, I do want to say again how much I've enjoyed having the opportunity to work with Attorney General Wrigley. He really takes seriously his role as a top law enforcement officer in the state of North Dakota. You can see that in how he spends his time, the things that he fights for, in his care for the rule of law in our state of North Dakota. So please, warm welcome for Attorney General Drew Wrigley.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Miller, assorted guests, men and women in uniform, out of uniform, kind of in uniform. I appreciate that. I too, I want to echo and thank you for your comments across the board, Gov. You always, one of the great pleasures of working with a governor like Governor Burgum is that he comes at problems from all angles, and it's whether you're having a conversation about legislation or some other matter, or sitting in a setting like this, and it's I appreciate it. I know we all do. So thank you very much for that. It's always leadership from a lot of different angles, and I think that benefits us all. It's a great moment to have this legislation. I think it's a good vision for things to put it together and have a discussion. You're talking about a lot of important matters here for law enforcement, an area of my professional life I've had the privilege of working in and out of for 30 years now. And it makes me feel old every time I point that out. We can't all be young like Andy Schneider and just starting off our career. You've been at this a couple weeks now, I know, and you're doing a great job. The governor highlighted the legislation, and we really appreciate that. There's a lot of work that's been done on recruitment for law enforcement for the reason the governor was mentioning and has talked about, and a lot of work done on retention of law enforcement. We know these are challenges, and they are addressed with this legislation, and we appreciate that. With regard to 1309, we proposed that for the BCI retirement multiplier, not just as a pat on the back to say, you guys are doing a great job. How can we make you happy? Lonnie Gabrowska, our great leader of the BCI, we've got a lot of our BCI folks here today, sat down with me early after the governor appointed me last winter and brought up the issue of the BCI, who has got certain educational requirements that push things at the start of their BCI career further down the road. And then they've got a requirement of 4 to 5 years of experience, pushing it further down the road. And you got to a situation where their tenures were stretching into an area where it was beyond maybe what was best for public and officer safety. And recognizing that was going to be a long haul, we really appreciate Lonnie bringing that issue forward on behalf of the BCI, engaging us, finding a great group of legislators. I'm going to name 2 in particular. Senator Sean Cleary, who's over here, and Minority Leader Boucher, there he is right there, and the people that you engaged, thank you very much. That was a long haul and well worth it. I'll conclude my remarks with this question, though. Why now? What's happened? What has happened in law enforcement that we're having a more difficult time recruiting and retaining? Are people not as tough as they used to be? What's happened? What's changed? Andy Schneider is one of the first people I talked to when I said I was considering running for Attorney General. I sat down in his office with him, and I started to hear the why now? What's the challenge? The very first conversation we ever had was in the wake of a murder of a Grand Forks police officer and a shooting of one of Sheriff Schneider's deputy. We met in person for the first time at the funeral. That other conversation came later and was in his office, and he talked to me about treatment of law enforcement officers when they're making arrests, fleeing from law enforcement and the danger that was causing to law enforcement officers and to our communities. Recidivism and how quickly violent criminals were coming back into the community. People are using firearms. You look at the crime statistics, they're dramatic. They are dramatic in our state and trending in the wrong way and have been for the last several years. So Sheriff Schneider, and then a long line of sheriffs and deputies and officers and BCI agents talking about why now? Why are we having such a hard time recruiting and retaining? And this legislation the governor outlines here, it helps in a lot of ways. But we also have work to do on the job. We have work to do on the job. It's a three-legged stool, kind of like we talk about that in the taxes. It's a three-legged stool for attracting talent into law enforcement. Someday retaining them so you can use their expertise for the betterment of our communities. I haven't left you out, Chief. Coming to my office how many times? Talk about these same issues in the crime lab and other things you brought forward. We put that into legislation. We've got other pending legislation. That's the third leg of that stool, the job. What are you facing when you're putting on that uniform? Who are you facing? How quickly do you face them after you arrested them before for a gun crime or whatever else? So we look forward to those discussions up ahead. We are, and I speak humbly as the chief law enforcement officer in this state, so I can say on behalf of the men and women in uniform, thank you for the legislation that you've all pushed to address some of the issues in law enforcement. The governor articulated them extremely, extremely well. And we look forward to continuing the other discussion on the other legislation that continues to pend about the job that you do, Andy, and the people that you recruit, in part with the legislation here today, and that we retain in our police departments and the BCI. But what are they facing every day? If you talk to their spouses, what do they know that their loved ones are facing every day? These aren't anecdotes. It's the life. And we're here to work on that. We appreciate the privilege of being here, Governor. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this and to highlight this important legislation. North Dakota does back the blue. North Dakota has a changing environment when it comes to crime, especially violent crime with firearms. And you can't ignore the statistics. And we're going to deal with that up ahead one way or the other. And this is an excellent, excellent grouping of legislation today. We look forward to the discussion continuing in the next several days here in the session. And it's a privilege to be with all of you today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming. The one thing that I would say that I've learned as a legislator, being here for a few years, is you don't write a speech when you're going after the governor and the attorney general, because they're going to say all the things you wanted to say. So I'm going to just be brief and say thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who was a part of the legislation. I had the opportunity to bring forward 1307, which is the Back the Blue grants, which are awarded for retaining and recruitment of our law enforcement officers in the state of North Dakota. I want to make sure I say thank you to Stephanie from the League of Cities and Danelle from the Association of Counties, who were both very instrumental in making sure that all of our legislators were educated about how important this was, making sure that law enforcement officials were reaching out to share the need for these grants with our legislators. You know, we have an amazing environment here in North Dakota. We have a wonderful, safe community atmosphere, and that's one of the best features about our state. We want to make sure that we are supporting our law enforcement officers because they are so essential to creating and maintaining that environment. Really, I guess the only thing I want to say is thank you to those who are serving now, and hopefully this will allow our sheriffs and our chiefs to bring more law enforcement, retain the law enforcement that we have, but also bring more people into the law enforcement profession in our community. You know, I think a lot of times we look at our law enforcement officers and say, you know, they're protecting us from the bad guys, but they're doing so much more than that. You know, they're resources for our students, they're heroes for our children, and I hope you feel that you are valued in that way as you're working every day in the state of North Dakota. You know, thank you from me, thank you from the members of the legislature, and hopefully you will feel that you want to live and work in the state of North Dakota for the rest of your career.
What a wonderful group of people to see. I just want to thank you for the work you do. That thin blue line, that line of safety between law-abiding citizens and those that would do them harm. You show up every day, and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. A lot of you already know this. In the morning when I wake up, I put on my wedding ring and I pray for my husband and children. And then I put on my thin blue line bracelet and pray for law enforcement safety in North Dakota. I do this every day because this is also family. I just want to thank you for being here. When Chief Ziegler contacted me on behalf of the chiefs, have people want to stay and retire here in law enforcement, that would help with his recruitment and retention, and so he asked me to sponsor the bill to not tax retirement income from law enforcement. I was delighted to do that, and the bill passed unanimously in the Senate. Only 2 votes against it in the House. North Dakota does respect and value the job that you're doing. Don't ever doubt it. In North Dakota, we value what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General. It was a privilege working with our state law enforcement officers on House Bill 1183. As a paramedic working in Bismarck and Mandan for the past 45 years, I've worked side by side law enforcement my entire career. The issue of retirement and retainment and recruitment all became real clear to me during the DAPL protests. Working down at the forward operating base many days and many nights, I was standing next to all facets of law enforcement, working for the state, working for local, working for sheriff's department, working from out of state. And when you looked at them, you saw people who were willing to risk their lives for you. What you didn't see was that they were all working inside of a system that treated them differently. And so I took it upon myself and worked with a bunch of different folks to try to equalize that playing field and make sure that we treat all of our law enforcement the same. And so I also want to thank Senator Cleary. He took this bill as his own in the Senate and worked it right through the Senate and made it into what it is today, the law. Not quite yet, but soon, the law. And so thank you very much.
I'm not as polished as a politician, so I need notes. I can't remember all this stuff, so yeah, I'm humbled here to be speaking for law enforcement, all of us in uniform, and even the ones that don't wear uniforms, Lonnie. So I want to start out by thanking the governor and the legislators who all made this day possible. It's awesome to be here in front of you, knowing that this legislation is coming forward to help our profession. I also want to thank our communities for strongly supporting law enforcement. When the governor mentioned back the blue, we don't experience what other states experience. We are experiencing shortage in law enforcement officers. People aren't getting in the profession, but we aren't ostracized as a profession. I also want to thank a special thanks to Representative Boris Jones. Her work on 1307, outstanding. Thank you very much for doing that. And a special thanks to Senator Diane Larson. I had the pleasure of working with her on 2147, and one thing I learned is that her desire to make North Dakota the safest place to raise families and to be a police officer is second to none, and I appreciate that. There's many reasons why we can get behind all these bills today. There's a few of them, though, that I will highlight. There's 4 things, in my opinion, that makes people want to be public servants in law enforcement. The first one is if they give their life in the line of duty, that we take care of their families in their absence. Second one is to be compensated for their service. The third thing is to be well trained and to be equipped necessary to protect the innocent. And last is when the hero's work is done, that we get a fair retirement. And all these bills today circle around all four of those things. With the signing of these bills, it puts us forward, I would say, in line with most other states in our country. The message that's being sent out today is, come be a law enforcement officer in North Dakota, because we want you here. Again, I can't thank everybody enough, and the legislators for what they did, the governor for everything you've done for law enforcement. I have to mention Todd Porter because I have to vote for him every time he runs for election, so I'll throw Todd in there too. So, and all my brothers and sisters in law enforcement, thank you for the service and sacrifice you do every single day. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, Chief. Thank you for batting clean up, wrapping it up. What we're going to do next, this formally concludes the speaking portion of the event. We do have some bills to sign. We're going to invite everybody in uniform and law enforcement who are not in uniform to join us, and we're going to invite the elected officials that were here today speaking, and then all of the legislators across all the bills, whether sponsors, not sponsors. If you help get these things across the finish line, we'd like to invite everybody up here for a group picture while we sign. But again, one more time, let's give it up for all of the men and women that wear the blue and the brown in North Dakota.
There's a handle on the bottom.
That handle's not in there that well. It's good.
You want me to sit? But I didn't, you already signed the one. That's okay. Thank you. This is just a formality. All right.
Pretty sure I was a co-sponsor, right?
Todd,
I think so, yes. Yes, you were. Yes, you were. Definitely.
Just wanted to make sure.
behind here.
Trouble?
He's got my back.
Why didn't I always send it back?
Just a little bit on the ends. Can't see Michael right now. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we'll do two of them. Everybody look at me at the first one, and then we'll do a signing one. Or everybody looks down at the governor.
Shouldn't Danelle be up here? Why should she take a picture?
Oh, Stephanie too? Yes,
Yeah, come on.
We'll get a picture to you.
Come in front because the end is right at his shoulder, so.
Like, no, you shouldn't be in front.
Yeah.
Day, you be in front.
Okay, you're ready.
Mike, coach him up here. We're taking two photos.
All right, right here. First one, everybody look at me. Ready? Anybody else? Okay, now everybody look down. The governor will sign it. Ready when you are? Now we can clap.
All right.
All right.
We have one more to sign. Stick around. That was 1307.
Okay, same thing. Round two.
1183.
right, right here, everybody. All right, now signing. Everybody look at the governor.
1183 is law. All right. Can't give those away. That's the real bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. It's always a pleasure. Damn right. I don't get a tax. I don't get a tax in 20 days. So I'm just trying to go. Imagine if we had